And hello, everyone. I'm Mitch McCoy here at KRK4 and Fox 16. It's 3:17. I want to go straight to Fox 16 Chief Meteorologist Jeff Baskin. Jeff is standing by in the studio. Jeff, you're tracking Laura this afternoon.
That's right, Mitch. Laura has intensified. It is now a hurricane. It's likely to get quite a bit stronger before it makes landfall. So that's our big concern as we go through the next couple of days. And of course, as far as the impacts on Arkansas, more confidence now that this is going to be a fairly significant storm system for Arkansas, with some heavy rainfall going is the main threat. We could be looking at preliminarily an area of 2 to 5 inches of rain, possibly even locally up to 7 inches of rain in some areas. And the reason for that is the storm is likely to slow down a bit as it moves through Arkansas in terms of forward speed.
So, Jeff, let's talk a little bit about, and we're looking at this on the screen. It's the satellite radar, and we're looking at that projection. We're looking at how it's intensified over the last several hours. What is the latest on the impact to Arkansas? We know that there's going to be a flooding threat. We know that there's a possible tornado threat. You have all of this information here at your fingertips.
Oh, that's right. You're looking at the satellite view. You should be looking at the colorized satellite view right now of Hurricane Laura, close-up image of it, and you see the red and the purple. That I'm just making sure that that's what we have up on the screen.
We have,
Mitch.
yeah, we have Max 2 up.
Oh, okay. All right, great. Well, that shows that large area of red and purple. Those are the cold high cloud tops, indicating where we have very tall thunderstorm activity. And when we're seeing that starting to consolidate around the center, and what that means is starting to get better organized. It is strengthening. The pressure has been dropping. We have aircraft recon out there right now looking at some of that data surrounding the storm. That's going to give us a better idea of the forecast. So some of that information is going to be fed into some of the computer models as we go into this evening. Now, let's take a look at this. Is the visible satellite view. This is the actual what it looks like from space, and you really see that circulation looks a lot more defined right now. The center looks very defined. We still don't have a well-defined eye, but that's likely to change later on tonight into tomorrow morning as that circulation wraps up. We get a really well-defined eye wall, and we'll likely have an eye standing out by the time we get into tomorrow morning. And with that, some intensification, possibly some rapid intensification as we go through Tuesday, Wednesday, and Wednesday night. Right now, the Hurricane Center predicting that Laura will intensify to a major hurricane, Category 3, before making landfall. You can see that forecast point off the Louisiana coast, winds 115 miles per hour, and it certainly could even become stronger than that by the time it makes landfall. Once it makes landfall, of course, it is going to weaken, but right now, the main risk area looks like from near Houston and Galveston through southwest Louisiana over towards Lake Charles. That is going to be the main risk area for landfall, and as we go into Thursday evening, the storm continues moving northward, weakens from a hurricane into a tropical storm. Now, the center is likely going to enter Arkansas by Thursday evening. However, we're going to have some potentially heavy rainfall come in well in advance of the center. Remember, that heavy rain is going to extend well out from the center. And as we get towards the overnight hours into early Friday, Laura likely weakens into a depression. Winds will drop below 40 miles per hour, drop below 39 miles per hour as far as sustained winds, although there still could be some strong wind gusts, and then moves out of the state as we go towards Friday evening. Now, as far as intensification, the reason why there's such a concern about rapid intensification over the next couple of days is the Laura is going to move over some very warm water, but not just warm water at the surface, but deep warm water, which means it's really tough to cool that water off, and that provides more fuel for the hurricane to intensify, and it's going to go over that area as we go into tonight, into tomorrow. You can see that green and yellow area. Well, that represents some very warm, some deep warm water, and that's why there's that potential for some significant intensification. Notice in that 24-hour period, the Hurricane Center indicating the storm going from a Category 1 hurricane to potentially a Category 3. So you really have to watch that area of warm water because there is that potential for rapid intensification. Now, as we take a look at rainfall, that very heavy rain is going to work well inland, even though the storm will weaken as far as wind speed. Still some heavy rainfall coming through Louisiana, Texas, right up into Arkansas. And again, the area of heaviest rain is really going to be very highly dependent on the actual track of Laura, but right now it looks like that heaviest rain likely near and just to the east of where that center goes. We could be looking at a large area of 2 to 5 inches, and some of the most recent data indicates possibly some localized amounts up to about 7 inches of rain. And again, that's going to be from late Thursday going into early Friday. Taking a look at some of the latest computer guidance, this is some of the early afternoon guidance that's just come in, and there's been actually a little bit of a shift westward now, with a lot of the guidance indicating more the upper Texas Gulf Coast from, say, Galveston to about Port Arthur, Texas. So it's looking like maybe a little farther west into the upper Texas coast. Still going to be a significant risk, though, for southwest Louisiana. Even if the center goes into Texas, there's still going to be some significant storm surge as well as a wind across southwest portions of Louisiana. Then the system moves into Arkansas. And again, it looks like a lot of that guidance has been shifted a little bit west and north of the previous forecast track. So next track comes out from the Hurricane Center at 4 p.m. And I'm thinking that track is going to be shifted a little bit west and a little bit north. And that's going to mean a bit more of a risk for some potentially severe weather for central Arkansas in association with the remnants of Laura as it moves on through. So real quick here, this takes a look at the forecast radar. And you can see the timing of this moving into Arkansas as far as the heavy rain getting in Arkansas during the morning hours, even though the hurricane will still be well south of us. Now, as we get into the afternoon, some of those heavy rain bands start to approach southwest and eventually central Arkansas. We go to a lower resolution model there. That's why it looks a little bit spread out. But we can see some of that heavy rain moving through portions of Arkansas into northern Arkansas as we get towards Thursday night and into Friday morning. And of course, with that circulation, we're going to have to be concerned about the possibility of a couple of isolated tornadoes, especially on the eastern side of that circulation. And those bands on the east side, those are the ones that you have to really watch the most for any embedded circulations. But as we get towards Friday evening, rain chances start to go down and we dry out as we go into the weekend, although a cold front will likely keep rain chances on the high side as we go into the weekend. So right now, again, it looks like for Arkansas, it's really going to be starting Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, early Friday morning. That's when we're going to have the heaviest rain. Could be looking at some strong wind gusts up to about 50 miles per hour, especially South Arkansas, where that storm first comes on in. And there is going to be the risk for some isolated tornadoes. So just be prepared for the possibility of some flooding and the possibility of some localized severe weather for Thursday into Thursday night and early Friday morning.
So Jeff, just a couple of questions here, and I'm monitoring the Facebook page. For those that have questions, feel free to ask them right now. We will answer your questions. We'll try to get to as many as possible. Of course, Jeff has brand new data to analyze here in about a half hour for Fox 16 News at 5:30. Jeff, as we look at this, and you say that you have to watch the projection, if it shifts just a little bit farther west, there is the likelihood of more severe weather possible. Why is that? Is that something that can easily be explained from a meteorologist perspective?
Well, typically with a system that's making landfall or inland, you get the most conducive wind shear pattern for rotations within those bands on the eastern and northeast side of that circulation. Usually the wind shear is not quite as strong on the western side of the circulation. It's more on the eastern side of the circulation where you have to watch out for that. Not so much right along the center. Usually you do not have tornadoes right near the center of a tropical system. There's just, if you start to get a localized area of rotation, it just kind of gets sheared apart. There's too much wind shear. But those conditions are usually a little bit more favorable farther east and northeast from the center of circulation. Again, the risk is typically quite a bit lower, but not none on the western side.
So when we look at a tornado threat, we're seeing a lot of conversation about that on social media. When would be the likelihood of that tornado threat?
This would most likely be for Thursday evening into Thursday night. Two reasons for that. There's going to be a little bit of daytime heating on Thursday before the rain arrives, so we'll have a chance to destabilize the atmosphere somewhat. And some of those outer bands will be able to take advantage of that heating. And with the timing of that system coming on in, some of those bands will be coming on in late afternoon into early evening, coinciding with maximum daytime heating. And it's within those bands that we're going to have to be most concerned about some isolated tornadoes. So again, this is going to be for later on Thursday, starting say late afternoon around say 5 o'clock or so, and then going through Thursday night. Now, as we get into the nighttime hours, we lose that instability. And at the same time, the overall storm system is weakening. So the threat for tornadoes will go down as we go into the overnight hours. And by Friday, the system is already moving away. So really not much of a severe weather threat as we get into Friday.
So southeast Arkansas, some folks asking about that area. Is there a greater flooding threat down there?
Well, again, that's really going to depend on the track. Now, as we take a look at the projected rainfall, I have that up right now, and you can see it's a little bit more centered towards south central and southwest Arkansas. And with the track likely to be shifted a little bit farther west and north, that would decrease the amount of rain for southeast Arkansas. So it looks a little bit less right now for southeast Arkansas, possibly about 1 to 3 inches south and east, with those heavier amounts more concentrated south and west. So right now, it looks like some of that heaviest rain more likely along the I-30 corridor from Texarkana up through Arkadelphia, Hot Springs, and into Little Rock. Now, Russellville is a little bit west of where you see that band of heavier rain. However, with that track being shifted a little bit farther towards the west, you'd have to watch out a little bit more for the River Valley over towards Russellville and potentially into parts of north central Arkansas as well for some of that heavier rainfall.
Pam is asking on Facebook, Jeff. She says, when can we get a bit more certain on the exact track that Laura will take?
Well, with every model run, we're getting a little bit more certain. So, as the hours go by, we're able to identify what is the most likely forecast track, and we've narrowed it down somewhat, where it looks like a track through central or western Arkansas looks most likely. A track more easterly into eastern Arkansas looks less likely at this point. So the solution where the storm winds up going more east of us and we have minimal impact, that solution has really come off the table at this point. So really it's a matter of how far west it goes. If it goes more towards the Oklahoma-Arkansas border, or if it comes a little bit closer into central Arkansas. But in either of those scenarios, there is going to be a flash flood risk and some risk of isolated tornadoes.
So let's, Jeff, if we can, just take a minute just to talk about this heavy rain. You know, we're looking at that rainfall potential on your computer, Max 2. What kind of threat is there when it comes to such a large amount of rain in such a short time period?
Well, when you're looking at several inches of rain over the course of, say, 6 to 12 hours, usually drainage systems can't really keep up with the rate of rainfall. So of course that's going to be an issue. Rapid rises on area creeks and streams. We haven't really had a whole lot of rain over the last couple of weeks, so the ground is somewhat dry. So it can take a pretty good amount of rain right now before everything starts to run off. But of course that's only going to last for so long. This isn't necessarily going to be a big major river flooding type situation, since there's really not going to be much rain upstream from the rivers in Arkansas, such as the Arkansas River, and the rivers just aren't really all that high right now. So this would likely be more of a short-term issue with poor drainage flooding, possibly some road flooding where there may have to be some roads that are temporarily closed, and some very high creeks and streams.
Okay, as we look at this Doppler radar, Jeff, we're looking at Max 2 here, and we have a split screen up so we can see you. Let's talk a little bit about what people need to do over the next 24 hours. As we look at the track, as you guys get that brand new data, what all do people need to be monitoring for over the next 24 hours? What's the next 24-hour goal?
Well, usually what people should do in a scenario like this is just to make sure that they're prepared to lose power in case there's a strong storm and power goes out. Make sure that your phones are charged up. If you do have to be on the roads, never drive through a flooded roadway. People get into trouble with that all the time when we say turn around, don't drown. When you drive across a road that's flooded, you might not know how badly it's flooded. The road could be partially washed out and you just don't see it. So you might think there's only a couple inches of water, it's no big deal. But then all of a sudden you're in water much deeper than that, and then you get stuck. And if that water is moving, it doesn't take very much to have your car washed right off the road and out into a ditch. And then before you know it, there's a swift water rescue going on. So never go through those flooded roadways. As far as weather radios, if you have a weather radio, make sure that it's working, that it's turned off, that you have a battery in it. Make sure to set those weather radios starting Thursday going into Thursday night. So treat this as a potential severe weather event. Typically tropical systems don't produce these big long track tornadoes like we do with those spring type storms when you get those supercell thunderstorms, but it can happen. You can get brief spin up tornadoes associated with the system as it moves on through. And again, some very heavy rainfall. There may be flash flood warnings issued. So if you're in a flood prone area, also a good idea to make sure that you're aware of any flood warnings that come out.
I can't help but think it's possible that the ground gets so saturated that trees, you get a little gust of wind, trees could collapse. Is that an issue, or has it been really dry lately?
It's dried out somewhat. The ground isn't too saturated, but of course, whenever you have strong wind gusts of say 40, 50 miles per hour, you can have trees that come down, or even large tree branches. Those trees come down, they can take down power lines, and they can cause a loss of power over a fairly extensive area. So that's just something to be mindful of. Yeah, we could be looking at some tree damage. We're not going to see severe thunderstorm type winds of 70, 80 miles per hour. We're not looking at, like what happened in Iowa. That's not something that's going to happen with the remnants of the storm as it gets into Arkansas. The winds just won't be that strong at the surface by the time the system gets that far inland. But again, it doesn't take 70 or 80 mile per hour winds to bring down trees in Arkansas. Sometimes that can happen with a 40 or 50 mile per hour wind gust.
So Adam is asking a little bit about Little Rock, and Jeff, I don't know how specific you can get down to cities here with it still being a couple days out, but will Little Rock get the 4 to 5 inches in a short amount of time, or will it be spread out?
Well, that's really tough to say in terms of how spread out it's going to be. Even though it's going to rain for a long duration, there may be a couple of very intense bands of rain that produce a lot of that rain in just a short period of time, in the span of maybe 45 minutes to an hour. So that's what we're going to be worried about, is one of those bands, especially if one of those bands sets up and then doesn't really move all that fast and keeps dumping rain in the same area. And that risk really is for anywhere in central Arkansas, or western Arkansas, southwest Arkansas, and northern Arkansas. So it's not specific to Little Rock, but really that threat is for just about anywhere in the state, although less of a threat for portions of southeast and eastern Arkansas.
All right, Chief Meteorologist Jeff Baskin in the Fox 16 studios for us this afternoon. Jeff, we appreciate it. I know you have your work cut out for you over here in the next few days as Hurricane Laura starts to make landfall, and then of course as it moves and tracks here into Arkansas. Jeff, anything else that you want to say as we wrap up? I know you have a busy day in the studio here as you get ready for the 5:30 show.
Well, we're just going to hope for the best with this situation. Hopefully the hurricane doesn't blow up into a Category 4 hurricane. Fortunately, it's not going to spend enough time over water that's a high likelihood. But it certainly can happen. We've seen storms blow up tremendously fast over the Gulf of Mexico. One example of that was just a couple years ago with Hurricane Michael, which went from a Category 1 to a Category 5 hurricane really in about 36 hours. It was incredible rapid intensification. So hopefully we don't see anything like that. And again, the system will weaken considerably by the time it gets into Arkansas, but there is going to be a heavy rain threat. So I just want everyone to be aware that it's going to be a little bit rough out there across Arkansas late Thursday into early Friday morning.
Jeff Baskin is in the Fox 16 studio. Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. Of course, you can watch Jeff's full report coming up in just a couple hours on Fox 16 News at 5:30. He will be in the studio tracking all of that brand new data that's going to be coming in. He will have that again at 5:30 on Fox 16 News. Here in just a couple hours. Of course, we encourage you to check our websites, fox16.com, krk.com. We will send alerts to your phone throughout the night. If severe weather does strike, if there's a tornado warning, it'll go straight to your phone. Also encourage you to download the Arkansas Storm Team app on your phone. It's good to do it now and be ahead of the storm. You can track it in on your smartphone. We will, of course, have live coverage as Laura begins the track here into the natural state, and of course live coverage as that storm continues to develop and make landfall here in the United States. But for now, I'm Mitch McCoy. Again, live coverage on Hurricane Laura coming up in just a few moments on KRK4 News at 4, and then Fox 16 News at 5:30. Updates on the smartphone, updates on our websites as the storm continues to develop. But again, download the Arkansas Storm Team app. Be ready, be prepared as Laura starts to track here into Arkansas. Have a good afternoon, everyone.